Hi, so this is the second installment of our series where we are reading and processing and sharing our journey with reading Think and Grow Rich for the first time. And I just got done reading chapter 1. Actually, I finished it a couple of days ago, and we actually decided to go through this book in a discussion format with some of our really good friends who have a completely different business, and I'm really excited they're coming over for lunch today, and we're gonna talk about chapter 1. So this gives me a good reason to refresh in the book and share with you kind of what I thought as I read some of the different stories that are in it, and that's something that I think is probably going to continue throughout the rest of the book. But this is, if you are intimidated by reading a business book, a personal development book, the stories in this book really help you process it. So it's very story driven, and I love that so far. So in the first chapter, it talks about this story of this man named Edwin Barnes, who really solely thinks and has a burning desire into his destiny and never lets that go. So his whole, and without giving too much of the story away, but it is a powerful story, his whole thing is that he wants to work with Thomas Edison, but he doesn't have any money to travel to where Thomas Edison lives, and he doesn't know him. So to be someone who works with him, and it's specified in the book, and not for him, could be just like an impossible dream for most people. Like most people would think it would be cool to work with, I don't know, Oprah, but they don't know Oprah, they don't have the same level of success that Oprah does. So they just think that that's a cool thought, but don't ever actually pursue it. Whereas Edwin Barnes has this thought, he really, really wants to do it, more than wants to do it, he has a burning desire to do it, and he decides to spend his money, travel on a freight train to go talk to Thomas Edison himself. So he speaks with one of the business associates, takes an entry-level position there and just waits for his time and his turn. Turns out it takes kind of a long time. It doesn't specify how much time, but it says several months go by with him just working this, normal wage entry-level position. And it also talks about how usually when there is an opportunity, it's going to be disguised as temporary defeat or misfortune or something, that makes it seem like this isn't going to happen. And so anyway, Thomas Edison designs a new machine that his business associates don't really like and aren't really excited about. And this Edwin Barnes man sees the potential of it, and he, convinces Thomas Edison that he can sell it, and he sells it so well that Thomas Edison makes him his right-hand guy in the business, and they work together for over 30 years, and he makes millions of dollars with him. And literally the whole premise of this story and what the example is saying is that he thought his way into this. He had the idea and he didn't let it go, that he wanted to work with Thomas Edison. And so kind of like what we were talking about in the first episode, he knew what he wanted, which is why that's so important to identify, because if you don't know what you want, you're kind of aiming at something fuzzy and unclear. So if you know what you want, then he had the determination to stand by that desire until he realized it, or until it came to be. So he wanted it, but he also stayed the path and saw challenges as opportunities instead of excuses and reasons to back out. So that is the first example that's given in chapter 1, and I do really, really appreciate that, because I think it really speaks to the concept of like, if you don't know what you want, it's gonna be really, really hard. If you do know what you want, then everything can be looked at as an opportunity rather than a challenge. The second story that's shared in chapter 1, or my summary and interpretation of it. So what's super cool about this story is I've actually heard it once before, early on in our entrepreneurship journey. It had been like shared with me on a training call, and it was the first time I had ever heard something like this before. And it's stuck with me now for the past 2.5 years. And now I'm understanding where that story and that reference and that example came from. So it's really cool, full circle for me, because this story was super impactful for me the first time I heard it. And now I know where that mentor like got it from, and that he read this book too, which is super cool. So this story is called 3 Feet from Gold. And it starts off by saying one of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. So the whole concept and premise of the story is that this man, R.U. Darby, like is convinced that digging for gold is, you know, the way to lots of money and riches. And so he is digging in this gold mine. I mean, I don't know all the logistics, and they do kind of go over them, but he stops because he gets tired of digging and digging and digging and not finding anything. And he was told that there was gold in this specific spot and he couldn't find it. And so he gave up and he walked away, and he sold his equipment to some random like junkyard man, essentially. And the junkyard man heard the story and was like, well, I wonder how close he was. If there's supposedly gold there, how much further did he have to go? So this junkyard man, which this part of the story, I don't remember when I heard it the first time being explained to me, but for me personally, think it's one of the most important parts. This junkyard man, who had no experience with this whatsoever, was like, I'm gonna ask like an expert how close they were to finding the gold. So he hires an expert, brings an expert out, and lo and behold, the people who quit were 3 feet from striking gold, literally 3 feet from drilling into gold. And so this random junkyard man, because he made the conscious decision to be like, I wonder how close they were, and I don't know how to know that, so I'm going to ask someone who does know, you know, struck gold and did very well for himself. Now, the man, Mr. Darby, who had that experience of learning there was gold there, committing to it, and quitting, heard the story and never let that go. And so he ended up using that to fuel him in his life, and he becomes a very successful insurance salesman because he just learned to never quit from that first experience of him failing. There was another experience that shaped his life too. So I love that part of the story too, is that he didn't like, even though he gave up in that situation, he learned from it to fuel himself for the future. And it like made him super successful because he understood the power of not quitting on the things that you really want. When he was giving a lecture about his success in the insurance industry, because eventually he starts making over $2 million a year, which again, this is a long time ago. So this is, I mean, that's a lot of money today, but that's a lot of money. A long time ago, he said when he was sharing this example of his uncle and the little girl, the lesson that he took away from that and what he can say now with complete confidence is the better portion of all sales I have made were made after people said no. And look, like, this is a little bit of a tangent for me, everything is sales. Like, I'm sorry, but if you are in business, like you're either selling yourself, your service, your product, like you do have to put yourself out there, and that to some extent is sales. So, you know, that's a very literal phrase of the better portion of all sales I have made were made after people had said no, but that can be applied to really so many different life experiences. And so that was another thing that I took away from reading this, that the author kind of elaborated on, is that between the story of the gold and missing and the junk man, that's how he's referenced in the book, deciding like, I wonder how close they were and going for it, and the story of the uncle and the little girl in the factory, all of those are very, very, like, to someone who's not looking for the example in them, boring stories. So the author kind of expands on the concept that both successes and failures have roots in very, very simple experiences. And so, you know, if you take the time to analyze them and their significance, that's where they can be life-changing experiences in very, very ordinary experiences. So I thought that that was cool. Let me see. There was one other thing that was part of chapter 1 that I found interesting. But really, like, this whole chapter is being set up with the idea that, like, your thoughts are what's going to either propel you or anchor you, like, or build you or destroy you. Like, you really do have so much power in the power of your thoughts. Oh, the other example is with Henry Ford, and that he wanted a specific, his V8 motor. He wanted that built. And it took like years. Like, his employees were saying, like, this is impossible. This is just like not feasible to do. And, he was like, you can either figure it out or work somewhere else. Like, this was something, you know, that he knew could be done. And so, like, that was another example of, like, the determination and power of your thoughts is really what, like, influences your destiny and your future. So that was another example that was shared. And then what was also cool was just like a little bit more information about the author. So he studied all of these men who had all of this success that carry this secret that they're about to unpack in the next however many chapters with these 13 principles. But he studied them for himself, and he ended up, like, for himself to be successful without the plan to write a book that would be so well renowned for hundreds of years or for 100 years. And he delivered a commencement address at Salem College in 1922. And there was a student in the audience, a graduate in the audience, who took what he was saying to heart. He became a congressman, and he wrote a letter to Napoleon Hill, the author, that said, like, please put this into a book. It was during the Great Depression, and he said, millions of people, this is the congressman's letter to the author of what inspired him to write the book. Millions of people are now facing the problem of staging a comeback because of the Depression, and I speak from personal experience when I say I know these earnest people would welcome the opportunity to tell you their problems and to receive your suggestions for the solution. You know the problems of those who face the necessity of beginning all over again. There are thousands of people in America today who would like to know how they can convert ideas into money, people who must start at scratch without finances and recoup their losses. If anyone can help them, you can. So he wrote a book, and he shared the secret. And so that's what we're gonna dive into with chapter 2. And chapter 2 is called The Starting Point of All Achievement, the First Step Toward Riches. It's titled Desire. So I'm gonna read that this coming week. It's actually the week of Christmas. So I'll be posting my thoughts on that, but I'm really excited. We happened to mention that we were doing this exercise together and this workbook together with some of our really close friends, and they had never heard of the book, but they were actually some of the people who believed in me enough to tell me like I could do our business full time if I wanted to. And so I'm just really excited to expand on this philosophy with them and do this together. I mean, that's a huge gift to have like really, really close friends who are gonna spend lunch doing something like this. So yeah. Oh, and if you are liking these, I don't know what I'm gonna call this, like live journaling, and you're interested in what I do, or like, you know, learning more about what I do, or what I'm all about, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Maddie McCoy, M-A-D-D-I-E, McCoy, M-C-C-O-Y. And I'd love to connect with you, especially if you are reading it as well and just hearing what your thoughts are. We can talk about it together. So be sure to subscribe to this series and follow me on Facebook or Instagram and let me know your thoughts as you're reading alongside with me. Or if you're reading it later and just catching this video series, I'd love to, you know, hear what you're reading or what you're thinking about it in real time. So have a great day, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Hey, what's up? Welcome back to our couples review of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. We just finished chapter 1, so we're gonna do a little review on that. We actually haven't talked about it. Maddie and I haven't talked about it yet together. It looks like chapter 2 is gonna be where the steps to riches, I think they call them, where that starts with the first step. So chapter 1 was just an introduction, but kind of sets up the book. Still a couple things that I thought were interesting. So the biggest thing was the story of a guy who went out to dig for gold, like in the gold rush days, and found like a little bit, and then went and bought all the really expensive equipment, and you know, spent a ton of time and energy and effort and money to dig for gold, and found a little bit and sent it off, and then all of a sudden it kind of dried up, and he basically, after a while, gave up and sold all of his equipment to somebody else who came out and hired somebody to tell him, you know, what went wrong with the first time. And the first guy was 3 feet from millions of dollars back in that time worth of gold. So, like it says in the book, where is it? One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. And then later it says, so the quote from the guy who gave up said, "I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance," because he eventually got into the insurance world and actually had a lot of success in that. The thing that was interesting about that thing for me is, especially like in our industry, in our line of work with network marketing, so many people like think that they're gonna jump in and make all this money right away, and even not in our industry, but they're gonna come out of college and get this really high paying job where they're doing really cool stuff and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden a couple things happen where there may be fail on the first couple sales attempts, or they're told no a couple times, or they have to do some work that maybe they don't enjoy, or they're not good at, and they quote unquote fail a little bit. And like it happens all the time where people quit, they try to move to the next thing. I don't know what the stat is, but somebody with our generation, millennials and Gen Z, like how often they flip jobs compared to our parents' generation, where, I mean, my father-in-law has had the same job for 40 years. So I don't know, it's interesting, like, how temporary defeat, according, you know, like, that's what the book calls this, temporary defeat makes a lot of people quit, where if you have that burning desire to, like, make it work, then you're gonna, it's just kind of a speed bump, not a wall. Is that what the phrase is? So I don't know, I thought that was interesting, because I also think, like, you always see those graphics or whatever, inspirational quotes on social media where it's like, success isn't a straight line, it's like all the ups and downs. But I think that even still, people expect it to be a straight line and fast and all of that kind of stuff. The other thing that was interesting about that story is the second guy who actually found the gold 3 feet from the original mine, actually went and found somebody who knew what they were looking at, and the book calls it seeking expert counsel before giving up. So he actually went and found somebody who knew how to look at that and evaluate it and make a rational decision based off of information. So it's, you know, I think that people get so held up on the how, you know, even when we're working with people and coaching people, they're like, okay, I want to do this, now how do I do it? And it's easy to get hung up on the how, but I think the how is always the easiest part. Like, we need to figure out the what and the why. Like, what do you want and why do you want it? And then the next part that never gets talked about is the who. Like, who can help you do that because they have the information, they've done it before, and then they will tell you the how rather than just like trying to figure out the how on your own. So I don't know. Chapter 1 was definitely interesting. Kind of a quick chapter, sets it up nicely, I think. And then, let's see if I highlighted anything else. I think that the next part of the book is gonna, so when it gets into the individual riches, that's when the workbook actually starts, with the first one. So we'll have more kind of concrete stuff to review at that point. But the other thing that was kind of interesting too, I mean, the book is called Think and Grow Rich, so it's all about your thoughts and how your mindset behind different things. So the other thing that said right before the end of the chapter is basically talking about the power of your thoughts, whether they're good or bad, and they're working for you or against you, whether you like them to or believe it or not. So the book says, this power makes no attempt to discriminate between destructive thoughts and constructive thoughts, that it will urge us to translate into physical reality thoughts of poverty just as quickly as it will influence us to act upon thoughts of riches. So I thought that was interesting. It's not always just, I mean, that applies to stuff that's not just money too. Like, if you have a negative mindset around health or your family or whatever, like I think all of that kind of stuff, if you're expecting bad things happen. If you're expecting good, I think generally good things happen. So it was kind of interesting to me that came up on page 33 of the book. That's, you know, super long and has been renowned for centuries, or a century almost. So yeah, I don't know. Chapter 1, I approve, I like it. We'll move on to chapter 2 soon, and stay tuned. If you find this interesting, be sure to like and subscribe and all that stuff so you get notified when we do the next chapter. And also go get the book for yourself and follow along and do the workbook with us. The whole point of this is we've never read it before and don't really know what to expect, but we are open-minded to what it could bring, and the whole point of doing this is so that we can do it with other people. So with that, we'll see you soon.